Imagine you're a car executive in 1993. Your company has been bankrupt, bailed out, mocked, and written off by almost everyone. Your factories once produced cars so bad that even your own employees had nicknames for them. And yet, somehow, you're about to unveil a saloon that motoring journalists are comparing favorably to the BMW 3 Series. Not apologetically. Not with caveats. Favorably. This is that story. And it ends in tragedy. At the beginning of the 1980s, British Leyland was drowning. Forced to launch embarrassments like the Ital and the Ambassador, cars so uninspired that staff inside BL nicknamed the latter the Embarrasser. The company was trapped. These were barely refreshed 1970s designs, starved of proper development money, patched together, and pushed out the door. BL desperately needed a lifeline, something that could fill its range with genuinely competitive cars without requiring billions it simply didn't have. The answer came from Japan. A collaboration with Honda gave BL access to new, quality models for minimal investment. In return, Honda gained a backdoor into the European market, critical timing, given looming import quotas threatening Japanese carmakers. The deal's first result was the Triumph Acclaim, a lightly reworked Honda Ballade. Modest, but it worked. Confidence grew, and with it, the ambition of the partnership. The Rover 200 followed, then the Rover 800, a genuine joint development between the two companies. The 1989 Rover 200 was a genuine hit, pairing Honda's bulletproof mechanicals with British styling inside and out that felt genuinely distinctive. The collaboration even freed up investment for the well-received K-Series engine. British Leyland, now reborn as Rover, was back on its feet. But the midsize gap in the range still needed filling. The aging Austin Montego needed a replacement, and early plans sketched out a lengthened, Reskin version wearing a face similar to the Rover 800, capable of taking on the Sierra and the Cavalier. The problem? Rover didn't have the money to keep the Montego's platform relevant, and the idea slowly died. Then, at the end of the 1980s, Honda came calling again, this time with something bigger. They suggested Rover produce a European version of their major seller, the Honda Accord. For Rover, it made perfect sense. The success of the 200 had proven the formula worked. For Honda, it meant extra revenue from an existing model and free insight into what European buyers actually wanted. The Accord was considerably larger than the Montego, bigger even than the Sierra and Cavalier, more in the territory of a Volkswagen Passat or Ford Granada. That wasn't necessarily a problem. Competing head-on with the razor-thin margins of the Sierra and Cavalier was a mug's game anyway. The deal came with conditions, of course. Rover couldn't substantially change the exterior. Honda engines had to be used. And the car couldn't be sold in the United States, a concession that stung less than it might have, since Rover's sterling adventure in America was already unraveling badly by 1989. But the exterior restriction turned out to be more negotiable than it first appeared. Honda and Rover designers worked intensely together to create a shape that could satisfy both companies, no trivial feat given how differently they saw the world. By the time the design work was done, Rover had been given room to rework almost every body panel except the front doors. By choosing their battles carefully, Rover came away from the process with a result remarkably close to their original sketches. The front end grew a bold grille, consciously echoing Rover's grand old cars like the P5. This was the beginning of Rover's love affair with its own heritage, a nostalgia trip that would eventually culminate in the Rover 75. Part of that inspiration came from the Sterling's failure in North America, where buyers had wanted something that looked unmistakably, classically British, the kind of presence you saw on a Jaguar XJ or on the best German luxury cars. The 800 had been refreshed with a new grille by 1991, but the thinking had started here, in sketches drawn in 1989. Chrome detailing and other luxury touches that were becoming rare on mainstream cars completed the look. The interior was Honda's domain this time. Unlike the 200, where Rover had transformed the cabin, the 600's interior was largely Honda's work, informed by lessons learned from the collaboration. Rover's contribution was, essentially, the badge on the steering wheel. A customer clinics told Rover exactly what they wanted to hear. The car read as an understated, classy saloon. desirable, premium. The grille alone, testers felt, added £2,000 to its perceived value. Handy because it cost about £2,000 more than the equivalent Accord. The Rover 600 launched in April 1993, and the reception was strong. Car journalists of the era made comparisons that would have seemed absurd a decade earlier. The 600, properly specified, held its own against entry-level BMW 3 Series models. It outpointed similarly priced versions of the all-new Ford Mondeo in Ghia trim. British Leyland had never found an answer to the Cortina, to the Sierra. Now, finally, with Honda's structural foundation beneath them and Rover's design instincts on top, they were genuinely competing with the best cars in Europe. Engine options were a 2.0-liter and a 2.3-liter, both from Honda, both available with manual or automatic gearboxes. None of them set pulses racing, but they weren't supposed to. They delivered a competent, pleasant, comfortable experience, which, if the goal is selling large numbers of cars to rational buyers, is exactly what you should be building. Upmarket trims brought ABS, leather, a CD changer, and air conditioning. Rover's advertising insisted repeatedly. Above all, it's a Rover. Whether it was really a Rover or just a Honda with a different grille was a question customers were entitled to ask. The launch of the 600 also threw the dependency into sharp relief. Rover's entry-level car was the 100, the old Metro, now 13 years old. Below that sat the Mini, a design from the 1950s, being sold as a lifestyle novelty rather than a serious car. The Maestro and Montego were aging out of relevance. The only genuinely modern Rovers were all Hondas, the 200, 400, 600, and 800. The MGF Roadster was coming, but it was never meant to move serious volume. Rover needed Honda far more than Honda needed Rover. Then came the bombshell. There had been reasonable speculation that Honda might take a formal stake in Rover, a logical next step given how intertwined the two companies had become. Instead, at the start of 1994, Rover was sold to BMW. It was a shock. And it immediately complicated everything, especially the freshly launched 600, which would normally have enjoyed an 8-year product cycle. The existing Honda agreement gave Rover no right to develop the 600's platform independently, making it a dead end for BMW, who would need to fund an entirely new replacement from scratch. After the BMW deal, Rover renegotiated the engine arrangement for the 600 and was finally permitted to use its own T-Series petrol engine. The result was the 620 Ti, 197 horsepower, 0 to 60 in around 7 seconds, a genuinely quick car. Fitting a Rover engine into a Honda Accord wasn't straightforward. Honda engines rotated in the opposite direction to Rover's, requiring significant engineering rework. But it was worth it. The range expanded, production costs fell, and sales picked up in 1994 and 1995. BMW, it should be said, wasn't particularly enthusiastic about the 620 Ti. Their vision for Rover was relaxed, unhurried motoring. And some reviewers quietly agreed. The 620 Ti had pace in a straight line, but felt less assured through corners than the chassis really wanted to be. Meanwhile, Rover's engineers delivered something remarkable, a direct-injection turbodiesel that combined real power with genuine economy. It debuted in the 600, and Honda was impressed enough to fit it in the Civic and Accord. It gave the 600 a meaningful boost in diesel-friendly markets like France and Italy. But under BMW ownership, the 600's days were numbered from the start. Minor updates arrived in 1996 and 1997, a smaller 1.8-liter Honda engine option, additional paint colors, revised suspension. The car received little real investment. Fleet buyers had enthusiastically taken the 600, but by the time BMW had arrived, it was a BMW on the company car list, not a Rover, that carried genuine status. A flood of Rover 600 lease returns hit the used car market, and residual values collapsed. In a move that revealed how badly things had deteriorated internally, Rover attempted to prop up used 600 values by quietly stockpiling them on an airfield, without BMW's knowledge. It was a desperate, ill-judged piece of financial engineering. Companies shouldn't be holding depreciating assets at that scale on their balance sheets. When Munich found out, it deepened their growing conviction that the Rover operation was unmanageable. Production of the 600 ended quietly in January 1999 as the new Rover 75 was announced. The 800 followed it into retirement shortly after, and with that, most of what remained of the Honda collaboration effectively dissolved. The 75 was unveiled with fanfare, but Rover's finances were hemorrhaging. BMW ultimately paid its future owners to take Rover off their hands in 2000. Parts availability became a final, quiet indignity. The newly independent and chronically cash-strapped MG Rover couldn't fund the standard 10 years of parts supply after production ends. Honda Accord mechanical components could substitute for some items, but not body panels. Many 600s were scrapped years ahead of their time for want of basic parts. If you trace the full, tortured lineage of Rover's midsize saloons, it reads like a history of the post-war British industrial condition written in steel. The Marina, a stopgap built on 1940s Morris minor bones, kept alive far too long because British Leyland went bankrupt. The Montego, funded by the taxpayer, never repaid. The decision to stop throwing good money after bad, leading to privatization. Privatization leading to Honda. Honda leading to the 600. And then the 75, a genuinely excellent car, built at enormous BMW expense, handed off to a company with almost no money and no future, eventually to be built in China by new owners. It's worth pausing to imagine a different version of events. What if, in 1989, Honda had decided they wanted what Acura was giving them in North America, a genuine European luxury foothold, and bought a minority stake in Rover instead? If Honda had rebuilt Longbridge and Cowley to their own tolerances, consolidated production, removed the royalty burden, and let Rover's designers continue doing what they had proven they could do, turning Honda's bones into something distinctly, compellingly British? Honda felt their cars deserved more premium recognition than the market was giving them. Rover was a ready-built luxury brand. The Rover dealer network could have supercharged Honda's European penetration. Workers would have had the kind of long-term security that Nissan's workforce in Sunderland came to know. There are problems with that picture, of course. Honda was pouring resources into establishing Acura in North America, and Japan's lost decades began in 1990 with a severity nobody anticipated. Investment might have slowed, but almost anything would have been better than what actually happened: a BMW acquisition where both sides made serious, expensive mistakes, and a perfectly good car was left to wither. The Rover 600 deserved better. It arrived competitive, well-made, and genuinely capable of standing with the best of its class. The BMW sale, announced just as momentum was building, dealt it a blow it never recovered from. Almost the same fate awaited the Rover 75. But the 600 had shown, clearly, convincingly, what Rover under Honda could have looked like. It has been largely forgotten. It shouldn't be. It remains one of the finest cars Rover ever built.